I mean, I could introduce myself while the ad still runs. And then once you'll see the slides, we'll actually dive into the content of today's session. Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to see you all here today. My name is Jennifer Athanasiou-Prins, and I'm the Executive Director of the European Press Prize. Before we get to the rest of the speakers, I want to tell you a bit about the European Press Prize. The European Press Prize was established because of a shared concern about the quality of the public debate. A public debate led by independent journalists, after all, is crucial for healthy democracies. Unfortunately, the reasons for our establishment are now more urgent than ever. The journalism landscape is changing rapidly, and independent and valuable information is increasingly vulnerable. This is why at the European Press Prize we focus on upholding journalistic standards by being a reference point for independent quality journalism in Europe. This helps ensure access to reliable, independent information and journalism, which is essential for informed decision-making. By awarding independent quality journalism annually, we aim to offer journalists recognition, visibility, and a source of legitimacy by being associated with this hallmark of quality journalism. Ultimately encouraging journalists to keep holding power to account and keep contributing to democratic societies. Today marks one of the most exciting days of our European Press Prize season, actually, since we will reveal our 2025 shortlist at the end of this panel. Before announcing the shortlist, however, we want to introduce you to former laureates of the prize, because the European Press Prize is also a community of great practitioners. Two of our laureates will be presenting today, Iliana Papangeli and Clement. Iliana and Megan will shed light on what their work focuses on and how they contribute to European journalism. Then, along with the chair of our Preparatory Committee, Cristian Lupșa, we'll get to the shortlist. Before we announce the shortlist publicly, Cristian and I will first discuss some things that stood out in this year's judging procedure, and after that we'll get to the actual announcement. We are on a somewhat tight schedule today, but we do want to give the audience the opportunity to ask our laureates some questions. So after the two laureate talks, there will be room for a few questions. For those of you that have more, come find us after the panel. For the first laureate talk, I'm very excited to introduce you to Iliana Papangeli, Managing Director of Solomon, a nonprofit based in Greece that produces journalism that serves the interest of the public. Work from Solomon has been nominated for the European Press Prize 4 times in the past 4 years in different award categories. Iliana was one of the main contributors for 2 out of those projects. Iliana will tell you more about Solomon's work and highlight some of their investigations that had big impact. That's an old picture. Okay, cool. Nice. So how does this work? The green. Okay, cool, amazing. So yeah, hi everyone. First off, thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to the whole European Press Prize team for the invitation and for the honor of sharing the stage today with these amazing people and colleagues. It's genuinely a pleasure to be here, and I'm grateful to be part of the European Press Prize community and family. So I thought I'd start with the how we met story, me and the European Press Prize. The first time I even heard about it was back in 2021. And I was maybe a year or 2 into journalism, still figuring things out. And that year, together with my colleague Stavros Malichoudis, we worked on the logbook of Moria, a story that revealed the inhumane conditions hundreds of unaccompanied minors were living inside the so-called safe zone of the Moria refugee camp on the Greek island of Lesbos. It was my first ever contribution to a cross-border collaborative story and my first investigation, really.
Anyway, Stavros had submitted the story to the EPP, and one day he calls me, super excited, and he's like, we're nominated, and he called his close friends, like colleagues, also his mom. And I was like, okay, it seems like a big deal, so maybe I should also call my mom and say the news. And so I do, and I'm like, hey mom, we are nominated for a prize. And she's like, what prize? There's this European Press Prize, it's for the Moria story. And she asks, there are words in journalism? And I'm like, apparently, yeah. Is it important? I'm like, I think so. Is it like the Oscars, but for journalists? And I go, well, if it will finally get you to stop giving me a hard time about quitting my PhD to become a journalist, then yeah, sure, let's call it Oscars, the Oscars. And she continues, and she's like, so if you win, are you gonna give one of those speeches where you thank your parents? And I'm like, okay, mom, gotta go, bye. That's it. Anyways, yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah. For those of you who don't know us, Solomon is a small, independent, non-profit newsroom based in Greece. We are committed to public interest journalism, digging into stories that matter, challenging dominant narratives, and holding power to account. Over the past few years, we've been working hard to rebuild trust in journalism, especially in a space and in a country where trust has been badly shaken. We team up regularly with outlets and teams from across Europe and beyond to produce investigations that expose abuses of power and push for accountability, whether it's at the national or EU level. Solomon is a small team. There's 7 people now. We just became 7, actually. But to borrow the words of Daniel Howden from Lighthouse Reports, Solomon punches above its weight. We have framed this tweet right next to our words. Just checking. Solomon has been nominated, like Jennifer said, for the European Press Prize 4 times in the past 4 years across different categories. I was involved into 2 of those projects, but today I want to take a moment to walk you through all 4 investigations, not just to talk about our work, but also to honor the incredible, talented journalists who made these stories possible with their courage, curiosity, and commitment to the truth. These nominations aren't just about recognition. They serve us as a reminder of the importance of sustained reporting on issues that truly matter to the public. Stories that don't fade away just because the news cycle or audience interest moves on. So yeah, take the Pillow shipwreck, for example, one of the deadliest refugees tragedies in the Mediterranean in recent years. On June 14, 2023, more than 600 people lost their lives after the Greek Coast Guard tried to drag an overcrowded fishing boat out of Greece's search and rescue zone, ultimately causing it to sink. Solomon joined forces with Forensics, The Guardian, and the German public broadcaster, ARD. On the slide, I've only included the names from Solomon's team, but more than 10 journalists and researchers worked on this project. Together, we traced the full course of the vessel, minute by minute, until it sank while under the watch of both Greek and European authorities. We also revealed a document showing that according to Frontex's own recommendations, the Coast Guard vessel involved was required to record the operation in video. That never happened. And just yesterday, by the way, together with Byrne and Pointer, we published a new story on Frontex and its executive director. Among other things, he said to our journalists that Greece had implemented some of the supposed safeguards for migrant rights only in a formalistic manner, and cameras were installed on Coast Guard vessels to monitor potential abuses, but they weren't turned on, and which is exactly what happened during the Pylos shipwreck. But yeah, what I really want to highlight here is what happens when journalists decide to stick around and keep digging. So we started reporting on the Pylos shipwreck just hours after the tragedy, publishing key details that revealed what had actually happened and really setting the stage for the larger collaborative investigation that followed. And even after the recognition, even after the spotlight moved on, we didn't walk away. Over the past year and a half, we kept going, like tracking new leads, uncovering overlooked evidence, and digging deeper into the systems of power that allowed this tragedy to happen with no one in the Greek authorities or the state held accountable. On the anniversary of the shipwreck, we released the podcast in collaboration with IMED back in Greece, both in English and Greek. In it, we uncovered new details about the final hours of the fishing trawler, the exact conditions under which it capsized, and we also covered the trial of the 9 survivors, refugees who were accused of trafficking and blamed for causing the shipwreck. And just last week, we found out that this podcast has been nominated for one of the One World Media Award, but that's not all. Our follow-up investigation, which we published at the end of last year, has also been nominated in the migration reporting category. And yeah, Greece had accused 9 Egyptians, refugees, survivors of the shipwreck, of being the smugglers responsible for this. And these men were facing potential sentences of hundreds of years in prison, but our reporting uncovered that Egyptian authorities had already informed Greece that these men weren't part of any smuggling network. Despite this, they were kept in prison for more than a year, used as scapegoats by the Greek state. Again, what I want to emphasize is that sustained investigative journalism matters. It's not just about breaking a story and receiving the recognition. It's about staying with it and pushing for accountability and using every tool we have to keep people engaged and informed. Yeah, this wasn't the only migration investigation of Solomon that was honored with a nomination. Like I mentioned earlier, the first time Solomon was nominated for the European Press Prize was for the Logbook of Moria, a collaboration with Investigate Europe and Reporters United. That story was published in 12 media outlets across Europe and translated into 8 languages. After the Logbook of Moria, we never really stopped digging into the realities faced by unaccompanied minors in Greece and across Europe. For example, since then, we've looked into how European countries are misclassifying unaccompanied children seeking asylum as adults. Or in our most recent story, we exposed the dire conditions hundreds of children are living inside the new camps known officially as the closed control access centers on the Greek islands. We're now 5 years on from the publication of the Logbook of Moria, and not much has changed. If anything, the EU budgets have gotten bigger. The Greek government has now installed surveillance systems in the camps that track people's movements, use behavioral analysis algorithms, and stream CCTV and drone footage to a control room inside the Ministry of Migration. And yet, yeah, based on our investigation and internal documents from EU agencies and Swiss authorities that we obtained through freedom of information requests, we found that children are still sleeping on the floor in shifts in these camps. So again, this goes back to the point I've been trying to make. We need sustained reporting. We can't just publish once and move on. We have to keep showing up, keep asking questions, and keep telling the stories that institutions would rather we forget. Last year, the Border Graves investigation carried out by an incredible team of mainly freelance journalists, but also journalists from multiple European media outlets, including Solomon, won the special award. This cross-border investigation revealed that over 1,000 men, women, and children who died at Europe's borders over the past decade were buried before they were even identified. It was a super important story, one that gave faces to those who perished, showing that EU countries are failing in their obligations under international human rights law. I've only included the names of the people involved again in Solomon's publication on this slide, but please take a moment and visit the European Press Prize website, where you'll find the full credits for all the talented journalists who worked on this months-long project. Yeah, last but not least, I'm finishing soon. This great investigation by dear colleagues Apostolis Fotiadis, Ludek Stavinoha, and Giacomo Zandonini about the European Commission's proposal to require digital platforms to scan users' communications for child sexual abuse material. While intended to protect children, the proposal raised serious concerns among privacy advocates and tech experts about potential mass surveillance and the undermining of end-to-end encryption. Here's a photo of Apostolis and Giacomo at the ceremony in Prague last year. And yes, this is Aston Kutcher. Apparently in 2012, he co-founded an organization called Thorn with Demi Moore, which works on developing AI tools to detect child sexual abuse material. And the investigation actually touched on how organizations like Thorn have influenced legislation in this area. Here are some other nice moments from the European Press Prize Awards and beyond. And yeah, I'll finish by saying that an award isn't just a pat on the back, and it's not the end of the story. Sometimes it becomes a commitment to keep digging, questioning, and shedding light where others might not look. That's the Pilos investigation example. When a story wins an award, it gets noticed, it gets talked about, and sometimes that attention is exactly what's needed to spark change. Awards help amplify voices, especially the ones that might otherwise be overlooked. And for independent, smaller media like us, like Solomon, recognition like this isn't just flattering, it's validating. It puts our work on the same page as some of the most respected outlets and journalists around the globe. And it says, hey, you know, what you're doing, this, it matters. And that means the world to us. Thank you, and looking forward to celebrating more excellent journalism with you all right after the announcement of the shortlist. Thank you.
Thank you, Iliana. Given the time, I think we're just going to move to the second speaker, and I'm sure we'll have time for questions after the panel. All right. For the next laureate talk, I am very happy to introduce you to Megan Clement. Megan is a freelance journalist who has written for many publications, including the New York Times and The Guardian. Megan edits Impact, a bilingual newsletter covering feminist movements worldwide, and is a co-founder of the Gender Beat, an international collective of journalists that advocates for high-quality reporting on gender inequality. Megan was nominated for our Migration Journalism Award last year. Today, she will talk about the challenge of producing high-quality journalism in Europe today.
Hey everybody. I apologize, I have some prepared remarks, which is why I'm standing at this rather imposing lectern. Thank you so much, guys, for having me back to talk about this and amongst such incredible company. I would like to talk about our investigation that was nominated for a European Press Prize in the migration category last year. And I would like to talk about what it meant to me as a journalist in Europe. So the shortlist was announced here in Perugia last year, and I was lucky enough to be here. It was wonderful. And I look forward to all of the nominees in this room having a similar experience very soon. Shortly after I returned home to Paris, I got hit by a van. I broke my elbow in 2 places. And I still went to Prague for the award ceremony. My partner was supposed to come with me, but he got COVID 2 days before I left, so I came alone with my sling. Just let that be a warning to this year's nominees. You might be a little bit cursed. I don't know. But I want to talk about why it was so important for me to go all the way to Prague and depend on the kindness of strangers at Charles de Gaulle Airport, which has never known kindness, just so I could get to this ceremony, right? And it was because the investigation that I had worked on with my colleagues Mace Cat, Fernand Van Tetz, and Charlotte Alfred with Lighthouse Reports had meant so much to all of us. We were working on a story about how Denmark's supposedly gender-neutral asylum system was disproportionately targeting Syrian women for deportation. These were women who were often victims of horrific domestic abuse, who faced reprisals from abusive family members if they were returned to Syria as threatened. And this investigation took us 3 years. During those 3 years, we spoke to some of the most traumatized people you can imagine. These were women who had lived through the horror of a civil war outside their homes and the terror of a war inside their homes, who then were disbelieved and threatened by the country that was supposed to be giving them asylum. It took us a very long time to gain their trust, to offer them space to tell their stories in a way that would not be re-traumatizing. And one of our sources, who had fled from Denmark because of this threat of deportation to the Netherlands and was living in terrible conditions in an asylum camp in the Netherlands, stopped participating in the story when it was clear that she would have to go back to her abusive partner. The original publisher of the story dropped us about halfway through those 3 years when their priorities changed and their budgets were slashed. And so we spent another few months pitching new outlets, only to be told a lot of the time, no, thank you, it's an interesting story, but we don't really have the space, or we don't have the time, or we don't have the budget, or it's not solutions enough, or it's not cross-border enough, or whatever. This is the kind of stuff that you hear a lot when you report on stories that affect women. So we could have dropped the story ourselves at that point, and it certainly would have been the economically rational choice to do so. I had long stopped being paid for my work on it, and the same was true of my colleagues. My dear partner encouraged me to drop it many times because he could see both our bank balance and the toll it was taking. But for us to drop that story would be for us to agree that those women's lives were not important, and we didn't. It would be to agree that accountability was not required from a government that prided itself on being a global leader in gender equality, but which had created a system that was disproportionately harming vulnerable women, and so we kept going. I had the luxury of being able to keep going because I have no dependents, and I had a part-time job writing this newsletter, the Impact newsletter, to keep me going while we re-reported the story, found new sources, asked the government for new data, and just kept pitching. Finally, we found an incredible home and supporter in New Lines magazine. It is wonderful. I hope you all read it. And in partnership with my newsletter, Impact, in which I publish feminist journalism, and the Arabic language publication Daraj, we were able to bring the story into the world. So then we received a nomination for the European Press Prize in the migration category. And really, that just gave us the validation that those 3 years were indeed worth it, that these stories were worth telling, and we were showing the world and the continent that we live in that gender inequality matters, and that these women, who are some of the most ignored and overlooked people on this continent, also mattered. It was so important. I really can't overstate it. And so that is why, wrapped up in my sling, it was so important for me to go to Prague with my colleague Mace and stand with our colleagues from around Europe, including Iliana and her amazing team at Solomon, who had worked just as hard on stories that were just as difficult or more so, reconstructing shipwrecks and investigating abuses against Uyghur minorities and tracking down border graves. You've seen the work, it is incredible. Which brings us to today. The world is a very different place now. I've got both arms, they work. Assad is gone, so my co-reporter Mace was able to return to Syria for the first time in 12 years, a month ago, to run workshops on investigative journalism for women. But unfortunately, and here's the downer, gender journalism is an even worse place now than it was when we were reporting this story. In July, my newsletter, the Impact newsletter, Small But Mighty, will almost certainly end because the priorities of the billionaire who funded it through his foundation have apparently shifted. I don't know if we fixed gender inequality and I didn't notice, but them's the breaks. Many people here at this festival are in the same boat, whether because of US AID cuts, or the other billionaire who did a U-turn on fact-checking and decided that that didn't matter anymore, or whether because we've got some optimistic ideas about what AI might be able to do that is not actually just killing the news business. Tomorrow, I am running part of a team running a workshop on gender journalism, and my dark joke has been that maybe we should just have a funeral for gender journalism instead. What a time to decide that reporting on women and gender minorities, on trans lives and queer lives doesn't matter anymore. We have a man found liable for sexual abuse in the White House. It's no surprise to hear that. He's being advised by yet another billionaire who believes in white genocide and the Great Replacement theory. These fascistic conspiracy theories have at their core a violent, racist misogyny based on who should reproduce, white women, and who should not, women from the global majority, as well as who should be erased, trans and gender non-conforming people. And before we feel too smug here in Europe, we must remember that the Great Replacement theory was born in France, where I live and report, and has spread throughout this continent with its ascendant far right. And here in Italy, it shouldn't be forgotten that we have lesbian mothers having their names removed from the birth certificates of their children by the government. Every year, 5,000 people at least have to leave one European country for another because they can't get an abortion. 6 women have died in Poland since 2021 because of abortion bans. And in my country, we are still reeling from a trial of 51 men who raped one woman while she was drugged and still couldn't believe that they'd done anything wrong. The response of the mayor of Giselle Pellicot's village was not one of horror at what had happened to a member of his community, but this: no one died. We have a lot of work to do, and we have a diminishing pool of funding with which to do it. We cannot, as a sector, run on volunteer energy, supportive family members, and sheer bloody-mindedness, much as we would like to. I will continue to report on gender inequality because its very existence has infuriated me since I was a small child, and you can probably tell that it still does. But I will also probably be signing up for unemployment in a couple of months. I am not sure I could produce another story like the one we were nominated for last year under the current conditions, much as I would like to and much as I will still try. It is so important that institutions like the European Press Prize continue to exist and continue to champion difficult journalism that takes time and dedication and doesn't just follow the latest trends. We are so lucky to be on this continent where journalism is celebrated in this way, where independent journalism is celebrated in this way. What we need now is the wider European media sector and the European community to support the production of the journalism that this prize celebrates. And if that journalism happens to take on gender inequality, a problem that no country on this earth has fixed yet, that would be great. So, to all these nominees this year, congratulations. I know how hard you've worked. It's a wonderful moment. Please enjoy. Break a leg, but keep your arm in one piece, please.
Thank you, Megan. If that isn't motivation for us to keep going, I don't know what is. Before we dive into the actual shortlist, I'd now like to welcome Cristian Lupșa to join me. Cristian is the chair of our Preparatory Committee. Let me very briefly tell you a bit more about our PrepCom. That's how we call it. The PrepCom is a judging body composed of around 20 professionals from 18 different countries. And the PrepCom is the beating heart of our organization, since they are the body responsible for reading all submissions entered for the European Press Prize every year. It's also the body that decides on the shortlist. To give you an idea, this year we received over 800 submissions, so that was quite a daunting task. Cristian, this is your 5th year as a member of the PrepCom and your 3rd year as chair. And I think, as we also heard through Megan's talk, it's fair to say that this year marked a very difficult year for judging and that the PrepCom faced quite some challenges. Every year you have many conversations, debates, but this year I think I can say that they felt even more urgent, especially given the importance and challenges of journalism today. Could you shed some light on all of this and explain a bit more about what challenges you faced exactly and how the intensity of the debates help you shape the eventual decision on this year's finalists?
Sure. First of all, hi everyone. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is better. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Congratulations to the nominees that we will be announcing shortly. I also want to thank Iliana and especially Megan for making my life easy. Because we prepped for this, I was supposed to list a bunch of things that make the current climate difficult. I think Megan did a really good job at setting the stage there. And all of the things Megan said and a few others that I'll list have made our conversation or have influenced our conversations this year. Of course, the main challenge is always to pick the best journalism, however a group of 20 people decides on that. But adding to all of the things Megan said, let's not forget that we're still having journalists killed in Gaza. There's over 175, I think, by the latest count of the Committee to Protect Journalists, that the elections and turmoil around the world last year have added to the pressures on journalists everywhere. A lot of pushbacks, a lot of slaps. Back home in Romania, we're having more panels on slaps than we used to. That's not a good sign. Let's not mention AI and the amount of crap content it is generating and it is making us fight against. Also, just to be honest, what was difficult this year, and I think it goes back to some of the things you've heard, small newsrooms in Southern Europe, the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, there were less contenders to take into account this year, which was difficult for us because the Press Prize really prides itself on giving a shot to the smaller players, but we had less to choose from. And part of that is the huge hit USAID and NED funding going away. That has decimated newsrooms, especially in Southern and Eastern Europe. Other billionaires deciding that funding priorities are elsewhere, but also partly it's our fault, our fear to innovate and try new things. And also a lot of debates that are happening in Perugia too about what are the boundaries of journalism today? When does it stray into activism? And there's also, and I'll say this plainly, there's a difference between what someone in my part of Europe understands as the boundaries of journalism and what someone in Germany understands as the boundaries of where journalism is. Because frankly, a German journalist would tell me, oh, that is too much activism, and someone in Ukraine would say, are you for real? So those all come into discussions when we talk, and all of these maybe have weighed on us this year more than in previous ones.
Yeah, it was a different meeting from the one last year in that sense, for sure. In light of those many conversations and debates the PrepCom has, not only as a peek behind the scenes for the audience, but also as valuable information for people that might be interested in entering their work for the European Press Prize in the future, what should one know that the PrepCom looks at when you judge? Could you share any best practices or advice from your experience?
Sure. So I'll say these few things everywhere I can, as long as I'm associated with the Press Prize, because I think what's special about the European Press Prize is that it levels the playing field, and there's no better example than Iliana and her newsroom in Greece. So let me give you a few pointers or things that you can maybe take home to your colleagues or let others know and encourage them to apply. So first of all, it's kind of obvious, but read the rules. Every prize has some rules, has some specifics. The European Press Prize is very open. It even allows you to enter work in your native language, but it does have some thresholds that you need to meet, like a word limit and things like that. And you don't want to be disqualified for not clearing those low bars. Don't oversell. I know we're influenced by all these grants that need us to oversell. Just tell a very clear story of why you made what you did and what impact it had, and I can guarantee it will be read as such. Small works, and again, you have a newsroom in Greece of just a few people trying to make it that was nominated 4 times. It's because of the quality of the work. You don't need to be a newsroom of 200 people with all the resources in the world. It needs to be good work. That's why the diversity in our PrepCom will surface good work, so small works. And also, context matters. The Press Prize has an innovation category, and what you submit might not look like innovation for a Scandinavian publisher who has the resources to wow us all, and we need them to push the boundaries. But what's innovation in Norway is not the same as what's innovation in Slovenia. So give us the context so we can analyze what you did through the prism of what's happening on the ground in your reality. And then give us something to argue over. So I was talking about what boundaries are and how they're shifting and how we interpret modern journalism. Do talk about those questions that you might have had doing a story that will inform our conversations as well.
Thank you, Cristian. One final question before we get to the actual announcement. We've spoken a lot about challenges, about tough things happening in the world, not only tough, heartbreaking and maddening. What is it that makes you hopeful for the future of journalism?
I think since yesterday I've hugged about 50 people here in Perugia, and everyone said something along the lines of, we're still here and it's really bad. So that always makes me hopeful. But also the work of people like Iliana and Megan, who keep doing this at a lot of personal cost, literally, oftentimes. Everything on the list that we will share makes me hopeful that there's amazing work being done. The amount of young people that are also here in Perugia makes me hopeful that there are people who still want to do this job. And also the resilience and creativity of journalists around the continent who are finding ways to make it even outside of newsrooms, like independent creators, newsletter makers. And I know the European Press Prize maybe is not set up to reward all the kinds of new journalism that's coming up because of, what the categories can cover, but rest assured that we see that work and we applaud it, even if it doesn't necessarily make our categories.
Okay, without further ado, for those in the room, the full shortlist and the main authors of all projects will be displayed on the screen behind us. And for those watching from home, you can visit europeanpressprize.com to view the entire shortlist after the panel. Cristian and I will read the titles of the shortlisted projects per category out loud, as well as the initial publication platforms. On the screen behind us, you will read the titles along with the main authors per project, but for all authors and other contributors, other media partners, etc., please visit our website. Everything is there. We can't name all. Some of our nominees are here in Perugia, as we know, or other representatives of their organizations. I would like to ask you to hold back the enthusiasm until we've gone through the whole list, but then afterwards there will be room and time for applause, cheering, and a lot of fun, I promise. And we'll also ask you to maybe take a group photo at the very end. There we go.
Let's go. So we'll start with the distinguished reporting categories, and the nominees are: Did Something Happen to Mom When She Was Young? A story published by Politico magazine in the US. Journalist or Russian Spy, The Strange Case of Pablo Gonzalez, published by The Guardian in the UK. Marwan Barghouti, The World's Most Important Prisoner, published by The Economist's 1843 magazine in the UK. René Damgaard is Saying a Final Goodbye to Life and to His Niece, published by Politiken in Denmark. And The Poet's Army, published by Revue 21 in France.
Then, in innovation, the nominees are Norway in Red, White and Grey, published by NRK Norway. Road to Redemption, How Israel's War Against Hamas Turned into a Springboard for Jewish Settlement in Gaza, published by Haaretz, Israel. Segregated by the Wheel of Inequality in Spain, How Impoverished Neighborhoods Become Hotspots for the Lower Educated, published by El Diario, Spain. This yellow glyphosate map reveals where farmers in the Netherlands spray the controversial herbicide, published by Follow the Money, RTV Drenthe, NH Nieuws, De Gelderlander, RTV Rijnmond, Omroep Zeeland, De Limburger en de onderzoeksredactie Brabant. I'm very happy that I speak Dutch. The Netherlands, Under Surveillance, How Location Data Jeopardizes German Security, published by Bayerischer Rundfunk, Netzpolitik.org, Tagesschau, ARD, Germany.
Now I understand how I got my categories. On to investigative reporting, and the nominees are Bismarck's Hut in the Forest, published by Frag den Staat, ZDF Magazin Royal in Germany. Deadly Prices, How Big Pharma Feeds Inequality in Europe, published by Investigate Europe and many different publications from 20 different European countries. From Child Labor in the Mines to Your Electric Car, published by Aftonbladet in Sweden. Serving Moscow, published by Ziarul de Garde from Moldova. And The Silent Battle Between Putin and the West Over a Crucial Oil Pipeline, published by NRC in the Netherlands.
Then onto the public discourse category. The nominees for that category are A Celebration of Selflessness, published by Die Zeit, Germany. Life and Death in Putin's Gulag, published by The Economist's 1843 magazine, UK. Memory Machines, published by The Dial, The Guardian, Aftenposten, and the New Hibernia Review. Mothers at the End of the World, published by Książki, Poland. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And The Immense Waste, published by Midor, Belgium.
And finally, nominated for the migration journalism category are 3,000 Nautical Miles of Hope, published by Der Spiegel in Germany. Because If I Die, No One Will Care, Children's Day at the Border, published by Oko Press in Poland. Growing Up Non-Western in Denmark's Nanny State, published by New Lines magazine. The Asylum King, published by Prospect Magazine and Liberty Investigates UK, and The Brutal Truth Behind Italy's Migrant Reduction, Beatings and Rape by EU-Funded Forces in Tunisia, published by The Guardian in the UK.
Then I think it's time for a very well-deserved round of applause for all this year's nominees. And that's it from our side. We would love to take a photo of those nominees or representatives of the outlets on the shortlist in the front of the room. And we're around for questions. Megan and Iliana are here still. But also take a moment to congratulate those nominees and people present here among the nominees.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So if you are with a nominee or with the outlet, just come up to the front so we see you and we'll take a photo.
Yes.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Don't worry.